And our reading from the Bible today comes from Deuteronomy, chapter 6, verse 1 through 9, and you can follow in the Bibles in the pews. Starts on page 143. Let's see, 1 through 9. Now this is the commandment, the statutes and the ordinances that the Lord your God charged me to teach you, to observe, in the land that you are about to cross into and occupy, so that you and your children and your children's children may fear the Lord your God all the days of your life, and keep all his decrees and his commandments that I am commanding you, so that your days may be long. Hear therefore, O Israel, and observe them diligently, so that it may go well with you, and so that you may multiply greatly in the land flowing with milk and honey, as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, has promised you. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is your God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. Keep these words that I am commanding you today in your heart. Recite them to your children, and talk about them when you are at home, and when you are away, when you lie down, and when you rise. Bind them as a sign on your hand. Fix them as an emblem on your forehead, and write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. May God add his blessing to this reading of his holy word.
Something that Mary and I have always tried to teach our children is that if something seems too good to be true, it probably isn't true, right? Now, you might think, Jesse, that is awfully pessimistic, but I want you to think about it for a minute, okay? Let's say that you receive a letter in the mail that says you are one of 3 people who have possibly won $1 million. But you have to get on the phone and call this number and be the first person in order to claim that prize. Now, what is the likelihood that that's true? Right? What is the likelihood that this letter is in fact a clever ploy by a company to get you to fill out a form that provides them with your mailing address so that you will in fact get 1 million pieces of junk mail between the time now and the time you die, right? And then beyond. Okay, then how about when you go to the mall and you see this nice, beautiful, shiny car out there on the floor? It is gorgeous. You can see your reflection in the paint job. You open it up and you smell that new car smell, and you're fascinated by the beautiful instrument panel, and you think, oh, wouldn't it be nice to have this car? And lo and behold, there's a table over there that says you can win this car. All you have to do is fill out one of these little cards, put it in the box, and you could win this car if your name is drawn. And so they draw the name out of the box, but alas, you are not the person who that car is going to, that's won the car. But about a month later, you get a piece of mail from that car dealership. And in that envelope is kind of this generic-looking car key. You ever got one of those? Yeah. And it says, if you bring this key down to our car lot, it's going to open, or it could open, one of the cars on that lot. And that car could be yours. Come on down and find out which one you'll drive off our lot. That sounds fun, right? Like a little scavenger hunt or something. But you take that key, you go down to the car lot, and not only have you signed up to get junk mail from that car lot for the rest of your life, but now you have a high-pressure salesperson tagging you all the way through this car lot as you're trying to just shop in peace. So, are you saying, well, Jesse, are you saying that nobody has ever won a car in a contest like that? No, I am not. I am not saying that. I am quite sure that people's names have been drawn from that box and they have become eligible to win the prize. But what they fail to do is look at the fine print on the bottom of that little drawing that says, if your name is drawn, you are also now responsible for tax, titles, and tags for that car. It's almost like, oh, you want a motor in that car, right? Well, we tell our kids everything has a price. There are very few things in this world that come free or come easy. And this is true. But if you're willing to pay the price, then fine. If you have weighed the odds and you realize that the odds are not in your favor and you want to try anyway, have at it. But all that junk mail is going to get real old real soon. And again, if it sounds too good to be true, it is probably not true. But that promise of a big ticket item, a big ticket prize, that is enticing, isn't it? So, here we have this passage of Scripture in front of us this morning where a promise is made to the children of Israel. And as we've been going through the history of Israel, remember that these people, these children of Israel, have been wandering in the wilderness way longer than they ever expected to wander in the wilderness. And the promise is, if you follow these statutes and laws, you and your children and your children's children are going to be set for life. Life will go well for you, and you will multiply greatly, and a land flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, has promised you. Well, all right. We've heard things like this before from Moses. If you follow me out of Egypt, I'll deliver you to a land overflowing with milk and honey. And yet here we are in a hot, dry land, if you can call it that, overflowing with scorpions and snakes and very little vegetation. Promises, promises. Now you're telling us that if we diligently follow all of these rather strange and difficult to follow rules, that we're going to get the milk and honey? What's the catch? What's the gimmick? What's the price that we have to pay? And if we do follow these statutes and laws, will we finally get that travel itinerary and the arrival date that we've been asking for to get to this land of milk and honey? And see, we who are the readers of these ancient texts, we who know that things eventually work out for the children of Israel and they end up getting out of the desert and where they're supposed to be getting, we know this, but we can get a little arrogant when we talk about how these foolish Hebrew people just didn't have any faith. We can roll our eyes when we read about their doubts and struggles and we say, oh, these poor, uneducated Hebrew people, they didn't know any better. They've only known a life of slavery. They didn't know any better like we do. And if we had been there, we wouldn't have doubted. Right? Because we never struggle with doubts when it comes to our faith. Let me tell you, I deal with doubts. As in, I am filled with great doubt whenever some religious leader tells me that they have never had any doubts about their faith or their calling or the decisions or actions that they've made or anything else. And isn't it strange how some religious leaders treat doubt like it's some kind of an unforgivable sin? Have you ever been made to feel guilty because of doubt? And has it ever really helped strengthen your faith at that time? You know, oh sure, we can look back on times when we've doubted before and we can say, wow, I guess my doubts were a little premature. Had I known back then what I know now, man, I wouldn't have doubted. But that's different than being there when the doubt hits you. It is different from going through the turmoil that we often face when something rocks our world so hard that we question whether God is listening or whether God is even there. We are told, never doubt when it comes to your faith. Never doubt when it comes to your convictions. Never doubt when you run into situations that seem like there's no way out, because God hates your doubt. And if you aren't careful, God will test your faith even more by sending worse things your way, at least until you finally learn to live a life of faith. But what happens to a lot of people who are made to feel guilty about their doubts is that they either put on a false front in order to fit in, or they just drop out. So, honestly, I don't think shaming people for doubting is a very effective tool for faith, is it? All right, so then what is a good tool to help people through their doubt? Well, to answer that question, let's take a look at who we are and how we fit in to the big picture of creation. Scripture affirms that we are created in the image of God. Scripture also affirms that God doesn't create junk. So, according to the book of Ecclesiastes, which I think is one of the most revered examples of ancient Middle Eastern wisdom literature, in chapter 3, verses 11 of Ecclesiastes, it says, God has made everything beautiful in its time and has set eternity in the human heart. As humans, we have the ability to discern by way of critical thinking. And when I say critical, I mean not going through life criticizing everything. This is different. When I say critical thinking, I'm talking about objective analysis and evaluation. This kind of critical thinking is actually a part of our survival instinct. Because at the very basic level, critical thinking helped prevent our historic forebears from walking into caves where bears live, right? I mean, think about that. You're going along and you see a cave and you think, oh my word, this might be a good cave to go in and take some shelter. And you go step there and there's paw prints all over the place. Now, critical thinking makes you stop and look at those paw prints and thinks, I wonder if it's a good idea to go into that cave, right? I'm sure some people did go into the caves, but, have faith, right? I don't know. At a more advanced contemporary level, here's something that y'all can get your heads wrapped around. Critical thinking helps us when we are faced with the temptation of dropping $120 for a 30-day supply of pills whose peddlers say will make you look like a supermodel without changing your exercise or eating habits. Critical thinking. So doubt isn't a bad thing. Doubt is not a bad thing. It is okay to doubt. It is healthy to doubt. It's how God wired us. And some might argue, no way, man. When we don't get doubt from God, doubt comes from Satan. But again, what kind of trouble would we be in if we didn't doubt sometimes? It is a gift. It just doesn't seem like much of a gift when our desire is to be faithful and to connect with God, but we just can't do it sometimes. So last week I said that the opposite of faith is not doubt. It is certainty. And in that same way, the opposite of doubt isn't faith. In fact, the opposite of doubt is the exact same thing as the opposite of faith. It's certainty. Certainty keeps a person from engaging that God-given part of our brain that helps us think and wrestle through tough issues. In fact, I believe doubt is actually or can actually be a precursor to faith. I wish, is Resham here today? No, Resham. I wish Resham was here today to back me up on this, because I read an old Sikh saying once that says, doubting is one of the most precious things in life, because if you do not doubt, there can be no revelation. Now that makes sense, because I think of the number of times when the light turns on in my head after I've struggled with doubt. Has that ever happened to you too? And just because we overcome one hurdle, just because the light of revelation comes on one time, doesn't mean that that light isn't going to flicker at other times. The beauty of this history of Israel that we've been going through is that there were many times when the children of Israel doubted. It was not always a smooth road. In fact, if you think about it, when was it ever a smooth road for them? When Abraham and Sarah were told that they were going to have children when they were well beyond childbearing age, they doubted. Jacob wrestled with his role in God's plan to the point where Scripture says he literally wrestled with God on the shores of the Jabbok River. This is the story that we started out with. Joseph's siblings doubted that their little brother was going to spare their lives after all the awful things they did to him. When God called Moses to lead those people out of Egypt, Moses had doubts about whether he could even come up with the words, because he confessed to God, I am slow in speech. The children of Israel, they doubted whether God would care for their basic needs in this barren wilderness. And this week, they're struggling with whether this agreement that they're about ready to enter into with God, this covenant, is going to get them any closer to their goal. And it doesn't stop there either. This collection of books that contains, we call the Bible, it contains history, poetry, letters, prophetic texts, wisdom literature, stories, commentary. It is filled with so many examples of people facing doubt and then receiving revelation. If you're going to take anything out of worship this morning with you, I want you to understand that doubt is not a bad thing. It does not mean you're any less of a child of God. In fact, I think doubt is essential to our faith journey because it gives us the ability to wonder and to question and to search and come to an even stronger faith and a stronger relationship with God.